Power doesn't panic when it's challenged. It panics when it recognizes itself in someone it can't control. There's a moment most people never see because it doesn't happen loudly and it doesn't happen in public. It happens behind closed doors, in calm rooms with expensive chairs, where people who run things speak in lowered voices, not because they're scared, but because they're calculating. That's the moment when someone high up stops scrolling, stops nodding, stops pretending, and quietly says your name. Not with praise, not with anger, with curiosity. The dangerous kind of curiosity that comes from realizing a few dots suddenly line up. Here's a fact most people don't know. In high-level environments, corporate, political, institutional, patterns matter more than personalities. Nobody cares how confident you sound or how polished your image is. What gets attention is repetition without explanation. The same individual showing up in unrelated outcomes. The same present surviving situations that usually erase people. When that happens, it triggers something called anomaly review. That's not drama, that's a real process. And once it starts, it doesn't stop with one glance. It turns into observation, then fixation. What makes this unsettling isn't that you were doing anything loud or rebellious. It's that you weren't. You weren't campaigning for visibility. You weren't announcing your intentions. You were just existing, consistently, intact. And that's what made the math stop working. Systems are built on predictability. You disrupted that by remaining yourself under pressure, which apparently is very inconvenient behavior. And here's where it gets slightly funny, because while you were busy living your life, someone else was building a mental corkboard about you like a detective in a low-budget thriller. Red string, raised eyebrows, long pauses. Not because you're special in the way movies portray it, but because you didn't fall apart where others reliably do. That alone makes people with authority sit up straighter. This isn't about ego. It's about recognition, the unsettling kind. The kind that happens when someone realizes you weren't on their radar because they underestimated the quiet variables. And once that realization lands, it doesn't leave, it watches closely. Number one, they realized you were never random. At first you were easy to dismiss. Another name, another face, another person passing through situations that swallow people every day. That's how they prefer it. Simple labels, clean explanations, neat boxes. But then someone took a second look. Not because you demanded attention, but because the story didn't add up. You kept showing up where outcomes changed. You kept surviving scenarios that were supposed to break you, reroute you, or quietly remove you from relevance. Random people don't do that. Random people don't leave consistent fingerprints on chaos. What unsettled them was not one event, but the accumulation. You walked away from things that leave most people bitter, unstable, or desperate for validation. And somehow you didn't rot from the inside. You didn't become small. You didn't become cruel. You didn't lose your sense of self just to fit into what was happening around you. That's when coincidence stopped being a comfortable excuse. Patterns began to form, and patterns make people nervous. They noticed you weren't protected by privilege, shortcuts, or favors. There was no obvious safety net under you, yet you landed on your feet more often than logic would allow. You adapted without selling pieces of yourself. You learned without turning cold. You stayed grounded while everything around you pushed for collapse. That kind of consistency forces a recalculation. When someone high up sees that, they stop asking what you do and start asking what you are. The most disturbing part for them was this. You didn't even seem aware of how unlikely your path was. You weren't bragging. You weren't telling war stories. You weren't trying to convince anyone of your strength. You moved forward like survival was normal, like clarity after chaos was expected. That quiet certainty made it impossible to dismiss you as a fluke. That's the moment they understood you weren't an accident of circumstances. You were a constant moving through changing environments. And once someone realizes you're not random, they can't unsee it. Everything you've ever touched suddenly looks intentional, even when you never planned it that way. Number 2, your name keeps appearing where it shouldn't. It started quietly. A file here, a mention there, a casual comment in a meeting that seemed unrelated. At first, they shrugged it off. Names circulate all the time in big networks, big systems, big operations. But then it kept happening. Your name kept surfacing in conversations and places that shouldn't have had anything to do with you. Not once, not twice, but enough times that patterns began to emerge. That's when someone high up stopped ignoring it. That's when curiosity turned into focus, and focus into fixation. It isn't about fame, attention, or deliberate influence. It's about presence, your presence, that refuses to be contained. You move through situations, and outcomes subtly shift. Your actions, even when quiet, leave traces that ripple outward, touching things you never intended. For someone observing from above, the repetition is impossible to explain away. They start connecting the dots, realizing your involvement isn't random. Every mention, every connection, every effect suddenly points back to you, and they notice. That's the kind of thing that makes people uncomfortable because systems like predictability, not anomalies. The fixation grows because this pattern suggests something deeper than skill or luck. It suggests consistency under pressure. It suggests resilience, clarity, and influence without visibility. You don't announce yourself, yet you can't be ignored. And when someone realizes a person exists at the intersections of so many events and outcomes without being orchestrated, they don't just watch casually. They start tracking. They start mapping. They want to know why the world bends subtly around you while everyone else struggles to move it at all. This isn't coincidence. It's not clever positioning. It's the kind of reality that doesn't fit neatly into spreadsheets or reports. For the people who notice it, the realization is unnerving. They are confronted with a truth that challenges control. You leave an imprint wherever you exist, not because you try to, but because you are exactly who you are. And once someone notices that, there's no going back. Your name doesn't just appear, it resonates. And that resonance has them watching every step. Number 3, you didn't break where others were supposed to. There were moments when the pressure was calibrated to crush you, not by accident, not randomly, but in the same way it crushes most people every day. The environment was harsh, expectations were stacked against you, and the outcome was already assumed. You were expected to fold, adapt in unhealthy ways, or come out smaller than you went in. That's how the system usually works. It applies weight and waits for compliance. But with you, something went wrong in that formula. You took hits that normally leave permanent dents, the kind that change how people trust, love, or see themselves. And yet you didn't splinter into bitterness or numbness. You didn't become loud and defensive, and you didn't disappear into self-doubt either. You processed what happened without letting it hollow you out. That alone is rare. Most people carry damage like an unpaid debt. You paid it down and kept moving. What unsettled observers was how you adjusted without losing your center. You learned the rules without becoming the rules. You grew thicker skin without growing a dead heart. Where others either hardened or collapsed, you stayed alert. That doesn't fit the expected outcome, and people who rely on predictable reactions don't like surprises. They start asking how someone can be pressured repeatedly and still remain grounded. The truth is, you didn't escape the pain. You absorbed it, sorted through it, and refused to let it define your limits. That takes a kind of internal discipline most people never develop. You weren't protected from struggle. You were shaped by it in a way that didn't disfigure you. And that's the part they didn't anticipate. When someone high up realizes a person can go through controlled chaos and come out clearer instead of cracked. They take notice. Because if you didn't break where others were supposed to, it means you're not operating on the same internal wiring. And that makes you impossible to manage the usual way. You don't respond to pressure as a threat. You respond to it as information. That realization changes how they see you forever. Number 4, your integrity survived environments meant to corrupt it. You've been in places most people would call toxic, dangerous, or impossible to navigate without losing yourself. The environments were designed to test limits, to blur lines, to bend people until they became something less than they started. Systems stacked the odds, and expectations were clear. Compromise, conform, or vanish quietly. Most would comply without hesitation. Most do, but you didn't. Your integrity didn't just survive. It thrived under pressure in a way that drew attention. What made this unsettling for those watching is that integrity is rarely visible until it's tested. It doesn't announce itself in meetings or in memos. It reveals itself in the quiet decisions, the refusals to cut corners, the invisible boundaries that you hold even when no one is looking. People high up noticed it not because it was flashy, but because it was consistent. You didn't bend for convenience. You didn't take shortcuts to please. You didn't adapt by lowering your standards. And that kind of consistency throws systems off balance because systems rely on predictability. You showed them that you could navigate complexity without selling your soul. You could manage relationships, power dynamics, and chaos without feeding into corruption. Every choice you made silently defied the expectation that anyone in your position would eventually crack. Observers realized you weren't just surviving. You were maintaining a moral compass in a world where it was designed to fail. That's rare enough to be alarming. The deeper truth is that people who value control over everything are unsettled by someone they can't manipulate. They saw that no matter the pressure, no matter the schemes, your internal code didn't bend. That's what made them fixated. They can't predict your moves with bribes, fear, or flattery. You aren't just honest, you're unbuyable. You exist as proof that someone can move through corrupting forces and still emerge intact, untainted, and fully aware. And once they realized that, there was no ignoring you. You became a variable they couldn't control, and the more they studied it, the more their curiosity turned into an intense, uneasy fixation. Number 5, you trigger internal reviews without ever filing complaints. You don't raise alarms. You don't send memos. You don't march in demanding attention or justice. Yet somehow, your presence alone initiates ripples that no one can ignore. Policies get re-examined, procedures are questioned, and people in positions of authority start reviewing their own actions. It isn't loud, it isn't aggressive, it's subtle, almost invisible, and that's what makes it powerful. High-level observers notice patterns, and your existence in certain spaces forces them to confront inconsistencies they were hoping would remain hidden. What unsettles people the most is that this isn't intentional. You're not strategizing to expose weaknesses. You're living, operating, and maintaining your standards. And in doing so, you reveal cracks in systems, incompetence in people, and hidden agendas that were assumed secure. The moment someone high up notices that you consistently force internal reflection without any outward agitation, fixation begins. It's not admiration. They don't necessarily like it. It's caution, curiosity, and a subtle unease. They watch how people respond to you, and they realize their own teams aren't behaving as expected. Certain protocols get double-checked, certain people start acting differently, and suddenly, the organization begins to realign itself quietly, often without anyone admitting why. That's what makes you dangerous in their eyes, not because you attack, but because your stability and clarity expose instability everywhere else. You become the silent barometer for accountability, even if no one admits it. And the irony is undeniable. You are the catalyst for reform without trying to be one. You aren't a whistleblower, a crusader, or a disruptor by choice. You're consistent. You're aware. You maintain standards where others bend, and systems start adjusting around you whether anyone wants them to or not. The realization that someone can influence so much without trying triggers obsession. Once someone high up understands this, they can't look at you the same way again. You are no longer just another participant. You are a variable, a measure, and a presence they can't ignore or control. Number 6. They noticed others change after interacting with you. People around you behave differently, and it doesn't go unnoticed. You don't push, preach, or manipulate, yet interactions with you leave a mark. Some people soften, some people stiffen, some reveal truths they were hiding even from themselves. It isn't intentional, but it's inevitable. Your presence acts as a mirror, not by choice but by nature. And when someone high up observes this pattern, the fixation starts. It isn't admiration. They're unsettled because you disrupt their predictability. People who rely on control don't like variables they can't manage, and you become that variable effortlessly. They start tracing back instances. Who changed? Who stumbled? Who revealed hidden motives? And in doing so, they realize the impact isn't random. Your influence spreads silently, almost like gravity. It doesn't announce itself with force, but those around you shift in ways that expose weaknesses, test character, and unmask hidden agendas. People who thought they were secure begin showing cracks. People who thought they were untouchable begin reconsidering their decisions. And that is exactly what draws high-level attention. The pattern becomes undeniable. Not because you're trying to lead, not because you're looking to impress, but because your clarity, composure, and authenticity contrast so sharply with the chaos and pretense around you. Others feel it, and that ripple effect signals to observers that you are not just another participant in the system. You are an agent of reflection. Your presence forces accountability in subtle, unavoidable ways. What unnerves them the most is that this can't be contained. You don't broadcast lessons, hand out instructions, or make demands. Yet people change because of you, and that shift is unpredictable. For someone high up, that unpredictability is a challenge they can't solve with strategy, authority, or pressure. You influence without effort, and that kind of impact is impossible to ignore. Once they notice, once they see the consistent transformation in everyone around you, the fixation is immediate. You stop being just a name or a face. You become a phenomenon they can't stop analyzing. Number 7, you don't chase access. Access finds you. You've never needed to push or plead for opportunities. Doors open without your intervention. Invitations arrive without your asking. Connections form in ways that feel almost accidental, yet the pattern is undeniable. That kind of presence unsettles people because it defies the usual rules. Most people claw, network, or scheme to be seen, to be heard, to be included. You don't do any of that, and yet opportunities, sometimes critical, sometimes improbable, gravitate toward you as if guided by a force beyond ordinary calculation. For someone high up, this is not just unusual, it's alarming. They begin to notice that you appear in situations others strategically maneuver to enter. You aren't forcing influence, but influence manifests around you. Your reputation, your skill, and even your quiet consistency draw people to include you in decisions, projects, and spaces that most would kill to access. It's not manipulation. It's a magnetic inevitability that makes observers lean closer, trying to figure out why you are everywhere without trying. The fixation deepens because this access exposes systems in ways that were never intended. People start wondering why someone with no visible agenda is consistently present where outcomes shift. They notice that your presence doesn't just matter, it changes dynamics even subtly. That's unnerving. Most of the powerful are used to being the ones who grant or control access. When they realize you don't need permission, that you are invited by circumstance or merit rather than lobbying, it forces a recalibration of perception. You can't be cornered, steered, or predicted in the usual ways. It's almost ironic. While others exhaust themselves chasing approval, recognition, or influence, you continue along your path, and the path finds you instead. And that is what draws attention at the highest levels. They notice patterns others ignore, outcomes you never publicize, and presence that cannot be ignored. Once someone recognizes that access gravitates toward you rather than the other way around, you become a phenomenon to monitor. You aren't just moving through spaces. They are moving around you in silent acknowledgement that you cannot be contained. Number 8. Your absence disrupts more than your presence. You've probably noticed that when you step back, things shift in ways no one expects. It's not just that your presence makes an impact. It's that your absence creates a vacuum that everyone feels. Tasks that seemed manageable suddenly stumble. Conversations that ran smoothly hit snags. Decisions that felt certain start to wobble. That kind of influence is rare because most people's absence barely leaves a mark. Yours does. It's the subtle but undeniable truth that your existence stabilizes more than anyone realizes, and your absence destabilizes just as powerfully. For someone high up, that pattern doesn't go unnoticed. They start mapping out the moments you weren't there, watching how workflows, relationships, and strategies falter without your silent guidance. It isn't about ego, it's about effect. You influence not through orders or authority, but through consistency, clarity, and presence. And when that stabilizing force withdraws, the system stumbles. That's the kind of observation that turns curiosity into obsession. Once they notice that your presence isn't merely helpful, but integral, they can't stop analyzing it. What makes this unsettling is that you don't control it consciously. You aren't trying to dominate or manipulate outcomes. You simply exist in alignment with your principles and your path, and the world around you responds. People aren't used to that kind of organic influence. Most influence is forced, calculated, transactional. Yours is natural, and it exposes the weaknesses in everything around you. They also realize that your absence highlights dependence. Without you, certain things can't function smoothly. It's a reminder that you aren't replaceable, even in spaces where everyone assumes you are. That realization is unnerving for someone high up, because systems thrive on predictability and control. When someone like you defies both, they are forced to take notice. Your absence becomes evidence of your power, your presence a stabilizing anchor. And once they connect those dots, the fixation is inevitable. You are no longer just a participant in the system. You are a force it quietly orients itself around, whether anyone admits it or not. Number 9, they saw that you can't be bought cheap. They noticed early on that the usual levers didn't work on you. Flattery, pressure, rewards, threats. Tools that move most people had no effect. You weren't interested in gaining approval for the sake of gain. You weren't swayed by fear or dazzled by influence. You had boundaries, standards, and an internal code that couldn't be negotiated away. For someone high up, that's unnerving. Most people in power are used to leverage. They expect people to bend, to compromise, to be swayed. But you weren't like that, and the realization hit them hard. It's not arrogance that makes you unpurchasable. It's awareness. You know your worth, your limits, and what matters to you. That clarity doesn't just repel manipulation, it exposes it. People around you start revealing their true intentions without realizing it, because they assume they can control or influence outcomes the usual way. And when they see that doesn't work on you, they can't help but pay attention. That attention quickly turns into a fixation because unpredictability in someone like you challenges the normal rules. Your unshakable standards make you quietly formidable. You move through situations with principles that don't bend under pressure, and that is rare. It's one thing to survive environments that test morality and patience. It's another to thrive in them without compromising your values. People high up notice patterns. They see who can be manipulated and who cannot. You fall into the latter category, and that is not something they encounter often. The deeper impact is subtle but undeniable. Your resistance to shortcuts, bribes, or coercion signals to others that you operate on a higher wavelength. It isn't about moral superiority, it's about reliability and self-possession. And when someone realizes you can't be bought, they start watching every move, analyzing every interaction, trying to figure out what makes you tick. They don't understand it, and that fuels the obsession. You aren't predictable, controllable, or replaceable, and once they see that clearly, it's impossible to ignore. You become a puzzle they can't solve, and that realization alone ensures you remain at the center of their attention. Number 10. You didn't imitate, you originated. They realize quickly that you don't follow trends or mimic what works for others. You create your own path, make your own rules, and influence outcomes without copying anyone. Originality like that stands out because it doesn't fit into predictable patterns. People high up are used to reading behaviors, forecasting moves, and controlling variables. When someone operates outside of those patterns, they immediately notice it. Your originality makes you untraceable in ways most people can be mapped or predicted. It isn't just that you think differently. It's that your actions ripple in ways that were never anticipated. Ideas, solutions, approaches, they emerge from you, not from a borrowed playbook. And because of that, outcomes that involve you rarely follow expected formulas. When someone high up starts connecting the dots, they see that you don't repeat what works for others. You innovate quietly, consistently, and effectively. That's disarming for observers who assume control comes from conformity or strategy. They begin to understand that influence doesn't always come from authority. Sometimes it comes from authenticity, clarity, and originality. Originality is more dangerous than imitation in systems built on predictability. Every time you make a move, it's difficult to counter or anticipate because there's no previous template to follow. People around you feel the difference. Plans that work on everyone else falter in your presence, not because you're aggressive, but because you operate on a different wavelength. High-level observers notice this, and the fixation grows. They are compelled to understand how you function, because the usual levers of control, pressure, reward, manipulation, don't yield results when someone originates rather than imitates. The deeper truth is that originality commands attention quietly but irresistibly. People are drawn to it, sometimes against their own interests, and systems are disrupted by it, even without intention. Once they connect, that you are not imitating, that you are creating, that you are a source rather than a reflection, they cannot ignore you. Your presence shifts dynamics, not by trying, but simply by existing as someone who operates beyond the expected. And that realization is what makes them fixated. Number 11, you understand power without worshipping it. They realize quickly that you see power for what it is, not for what most people pretend it represents. You understand its rules, its leverage, and its influence, but you don't bow to it. You don't inflate it with fear, respect, or flattery, and that unsettles people who are used to being revered simply for holding positions. Most individuals interact with authority expecting submission or approval. You don't. You navigate systems and hierarchies with awareness, clarity, and autonomy, which makes you unpredictable. And that's exactly why someone high up begins to fixate. It isn't rebellion, it's comprehension. You know who holds sway, where decisions are made, and what outcomes are likely, but you operate on your own terms. You recognize manipulation, control tactics, and hidden agendas, yet you aren't controlled by them. People expect influence to be acknowledged through submission. When they see that you neither bow nor bend, they can't categorize you. They can't slot you into the predictable roles everyone else fits into. That's disarming. Systems thrive on compliance and expectation. You thrive on awareness and agency. Your ability to move through power structures without worship or fear makes you quietly formidable. People notice the difference because you are not motivated by ego or alignment with authority. You are motivated by clarity, integrity, and purpose. That combination is rare. It leaves observers trying to calculate outcomes that are essentially unknowable because you aren't responding in the ways most people would. The fixation begins when they understand the implications. You can influence, adapt, and survive without submitting. You are aware of the stakes, the players, and the rules, but you never let them define your choices. Your presence shifts dynamics without aggression or overt strategy, and that is profoundly unsettling for those used to predictable loyalty or fear-driven compliance. Once someone high up recognizes that you comprehend power without being enslaved by it, they cannot stop analyzing your every move. You are no longer just a participant. They see you as an anomaly, a variable, and a force they cannot control or fully predict. Number 12, they realized you're calm because you've already faced worse. Your composure isn't luck or arrogance, it's experience. You've been through situations that would unsettle, break, or overwhelm most people, and you survived them. Not only did you survive, but you learned, adapted, and moved forward with clarity. That quiet confidence unsettles those watching because it's not performative. It's rooted in real understanding of risk, adversity, and the limits of control. Someone high up noticed that no threat, no pressure, no maneuvering seems to shake you, and that recognition is what turns curiosity into fixation. They see the pattern. While others panic, overreact, or bend under stress, you remain measured. Your reactions, or lack of dramatic reactions, reveal a kind of inner mastery that most people only read about in books or see in rare mentors. That kind of calm exposes the fragility of those around you. It shows who is unprepared, who relies on theatrics, and who depends on fear to maintain authority. Observers who thought they had a handle on systems suddenly realize there's someone in the room who isn't operating under their assumptions, someone whose stability cannot be manipulated. What makes this even more alarming is that your calm isn't passive. It's active, subtle, and strategic, without being obvious. You process chaos efficiently, make decisions without emotional distortion, and act in ways that maintain integrity and clarity. People high up, used to predictable reactions, are forced to pause and recalibrate every time you interact or appear in critical situations. They begin to understand that your composure isn't just about surviving, it's about having already mastered worse. They realize they cannot intimidate you, destabilize you, or pressure you into errors. And once that realization lands, it triggers a deeper awareness. Someone who remains unshakable in the face of extreme pressure is not just competent, they are untouchable in ways that systems cannot predict or control. That is why their attention becomes fixed. You are no longer just present, you are a stabilizing force and a mirror showing everyone else how unprepared they really are. Number 13. Your story doesn't fit their narrative models. They tried to categorize you. They attempted to place you into neat boxes: victim, rebel, prodigy, threat, but none of it fit. Your story refuses to follow the scripts they are used to reading. Systems, hierarchies, and people in positions of power rely on predictability, and part of that predictability comes from narratives. Everyone has a pattern, a role, a predictable arc. You don't. You exist in a way that constantly challenges assumptions, and that unpredictability makes people uncomfortable. They notice the inconsistencies in the ways you handle situations, the ways you navigate pressure, and the ways you influence outcomes without seeking control. Where most people would crumble, bend, or seek validation, you act in alignment with your principles. Where others would exaggerate, manipulate, or compete for recognition, you remain grounded and unshakable. That combination refuses to fit into the tidy stories people construct to understand the world. For someone high up, that is alarming because narratives are how they justify decisions, control systems, and predict behavior. You operate outside those boundaries. Your story challenges their mental models. Every time they try to anticipate your reaction, you defy it. Every time they attempt to categorize your motives, you rewrite the script. It's not arrogance or performance, it's authenticity under pressure, clarity amid chaos, and self-possession that cannot be replicated. That realization is destabilizing for anyone whose power relies on predictability. The fixation begins when they understand that you are not just unpredictable for the sake of it. You are consistent in being inconsistent with expectation. Your story exposes gaps, reveals truths, and undermines assumptions without trying. People around you are forced to confront their own limitations, their own blind spots, and their inability to fully control or comprehend your trajectory. Once someone sees that you cannot be neatly slotted into their narrative frameworks, they are compelled to study you, monitor you, and attempt, futilely, to anticipate your next move. You are no longer just a participant in the system. You are a variable, a revelation, and an anomaly that cannot be contained. Number 14. They finally understood you're still becoming. What unsettled them the most wasn't who you are today. It was the realization that you aren't finished. Everything they've seen so far, every success, every survival, every subtle shift you've caused, is only a fraction of what you are capable of. Someone high up traced your path, analyzed patterns, and for the first time, truly understood that what they observed was just the beginning. That realization is what turns attention into obsession, because they understand that the potential you carry far exceeds anything they've prepared for or attempted to control. They noticed your consistency under pressure, your ability to influence without force, your resilience in the face of challenges, and your originality in thought and action. But the deeper truth is that all of this is still evolving. You are in motion, growing sharper, stronger, and more aware with every experience. That trajectory is unpredictable, and unpredictability in someone with your impact is unsettling to observers who rely on control and forecasting. They can chart your past, but they cannot fully anticipate your future, and that uncertainty makes them watch closer, calculate harder, and fixate more intensely. Your becoming is silent, deliberate, and undeniable. You don't announce your growth, you embody it. Every interaction, every decision, every quiet success compounds over time, creating a presence that cannot be ignored. For someone high up, the danger lies not in what you have done, but in what you are still capable of doing. That is the kind of revelation that makes people pause and reconsider everything they assumed about influence, control, and outcomes. Once they understood that your story is unfinished, that your impact will continue to expand, they could no longer treat you as just another player. They realized you are a force in progress, a variable whose full potential is yet to be revealed. That knowledge keeps them watching, studying, and calculating. You have already exceeded expectations without trying, and what they see now is only a fraction of what you will eventually manifest. Recognition of your becoming is both awe-inspiring and unsettling, and it guarantees that attention from those who notice your true trajectory will never waver. The pattern is undeniable and the truth is unavoidable. You're not just another individual moving through systems, hierarchies, or challenges. Every dot that someone high up has connected about you reveals a presence, a consistency, and an influence that cannot be ignored, controlled, or predicted. From your unwavering integrity to the subtle power of your calm, from the way access seems to find you to the impact you have on others without even trying, you exist as a variable that defies conventional rules. You survive where others break, you stand firm where others bend, and you move forward while exposing the cracks and limitations of the systems around you. They notice that your story doesn't fit neat narratives, that your originality challenges the status quo, and that your trajectory is still unfolding, meaning what they've witnessed so far is only the beginning. Every action you've taken, every outcome you've influenced, and every presence you've impacted has created a ripple effect that demands attention. You aren't seeking validation, recognition, or control, yet your influence is undeniable. People high up, accustomed to predictability and compliance, find themselves fixated because you operate on your own terms, authentic, unshakable, and evolving. This is the reality of your existence, quiet but powerful, subtle yet unavoidable, disciplined yet free from the chains that bind others. You are both a mirror and a force, reflecting truth, exposing weakness, and demonstrating what is possible when someone refuses to be defined by expectation. Every observer, every system, every individual who crosses your path cannot help but take notice, because you embody a level of clarity, resilience, and originality that disrupts their assumptions. If this message resonated with you, make sure to stay connected. Subscribe to the channel to catch every insight and revelation. Like this video to show your support. Comment your thoughts and experiences because your voice matters. And share it with others who need to understand the magnitude of presence and influence in a world that often underestimates it. The more we see and recognize these truths, the stronger and clearer our own paths become. Your journey matters, and so does the awareness of those who witness it. God bless you.